So today we're going to talk about Valorant's Duelist problem, and I know that a lot of you probably think that in patch 4.08 with the Jett nerfs that we are recently getting that are up on the screen, that, you know, a lot of it will be fixed, that hey, Jett's getting nerfed and that's a great thing. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely agree that Jett needed a nerf, and I think it's a good nerf as well. I'm very happy with what they're doing, and I'm sure that most of you probably think, hey, with this Jett nerf, maybe a Phoenix buff, I know some people might want a Neon buff as well, that at that point, you know, the Duelist class will be solved, much like it was for the Controller class, you know, that we'll be fine, we'll be in a healthy place again, and everything will be good. And I think that that might be true for, you know, the lower levels of the game, that we might see a much more balanced game overall in terms of the pick rates and whatnot, and that'll be great. But I think once you start getting into the higher elos of the game, and particularly for competitive play, I think that there is actually a much bigger problem that's going to take a lot more time and effort than just simply changing a couple agents and maybe changing a couple numbers on some abilities. Let me explain, because here are the 6 duelists that are currently in Valorant right now. And the way that these duelists work, in my mind, is that whilst, yes, they are all duelists, you can actually split them into 2 subcategories of duelist. And that is what I have done, because on the left here, we have the movement duelists, as I will call them, and on the right, you have the flashing duelists. Now, it's pretty self-explanatory. The movement duelists have abilities which allow them to move around the map, unlike other agents. And that gives them the ability to really enter onto the site, create space for their team, and that is how they are used a lot of the time in Valorant. Obviously for Jett, she has her updraft and her dash. Raze has her satchels, and Neon can run around fast and slide. But for the flashing duelists, they don't really have that as much. They don't have that ability to create that space and create those different angles. You could argue for Yoru that he kind of is a bit in between the 2 sides, because he does have, with his gate crash, some movement ability. But the thing is, this has to be pre-placed. It can only go to a certain location. It's not nearly as fluid as the other movement duelists are. And so it can be quite risky to just, you know, randomly teleport to an area, not knowing where your opponents are on the site. And for Reyna and Phoenix, they simply just do not have any movement abilities. Reyna, I guess, again, you could argue she needs a kill, but obviously that is a massive prerequisite to be able to move further into the site. And so this has led to this situation that you see on your screen right now, because here are the agent pick rates for the current Masters Reykjavik tournament that are going on right now. And you can see by this chart that the movement duelists are the ones that see play, and the flashing duelists do not see play, because the movement duelists give you something different that no one else can and are more helpful to the team. You can see Jett is actually the most picked agent. That's not a surprise, and obviously with the nerf, hopefully that will come down to a more reasonable level. But also you have Raze here, you know, who's doing perfectly well at 27%, and even Neon has slightly increased. You know, she obviously is the newest agent, so there's probably something going on there with the low pick rate, but I expect with the Jett nerf that will come up as well. But you can see our lowest 3 agents are all of the flashing duelists. They are not seen as being that useful, and if Paper Rex weren't in this Masters Reykjavik tournament, these numbers would be even lower. And also another thing to note is that there have only been 3 maps, not matches, 3 maps in this entire tournament where one of Jett, Raze, or Neon hasn't been picked by a side. And those 3 times were all Optic on Icebox, where they run a no duelist comp. And for our 3 flashing duelists, they have only been picked as secondary duelists. They have never been the primary duelist on any side. And so that for me is a big worry, that yes, whilst I agree with this Jett nerf, and I'm glad that it's coming because this is a very high pick rate indeed, I feel like actually the biggest beneficiaries of the Jett nerf will not be these 3 down at the bottom, but will probably be Neon and Raze getting a bit more pick rate on certain maps instead of Jett. And you might think that that is not the intended outcome necessarily of this Jett nerf. And so the first thing we need to talk about really is, are the flashing duelists just bad? Well, in terms of talking about pro play, yeah, kind of. We all know that Phoenix in particular is just the worst agent in the game and needs significant buffs no matter what. We can all pretty much agree on that, and that one's fine. Reyna, whilst fine for a ranked game, and I've talked about this in the past, is just not good enough in terms of the team level, in terms of that team coordinated play that you see in pro play a lot. She just doesn't quite give enough a lot of the time to be worth picking. And so she's fine for ranked, maybe not so much for the pros, but that might be fine if you view that as a fine thing anyway. Then she's in an okay spot. And Yoru obviously got his recent rework, and so I'm sure that there's still a level of pros getting familiar with playing Yoru at a good level and, you know, hopefully finding a place for him on certain maps. But I also think that there's probably plenty of people out there who are very scared of picking Yoru because they see it very much as a gimmick and they see him kind of as, you know, a fun character, no doubt, but one that maybe isn't conducive again to pro level or even high level play. But to me, the big problem is not just that they are bad, it's actually the comparison with the aggressive initiators, as I will call them, in Skye and KO. Because I think you can separate the initiators into two classes as well, with the kind of more passive team-based initiators in Sova and Breach, and the aggressive initiators in Skye and KO that are right there behind the Duelist, the second man in, ready to go in and, you know, flash for the team and get in there and can join the fight as well. That these two agents, that is what they primarily do in a pro team. And the problem is that these aggressive initiators and flashing duelists have quite a bit of overlap, but the aggressive initiators are just way better overall than the flashing duelists. And it seems like many of the pro teams agree with me as well, because we have both Skye and KO at a very healthy 31% pick rate, and on some maps you will never see a map of a pro game without one of these two agents depending on the map. And they're in a very healthy spot, but as we know, our flashing duelists are not in a good spot. And one of the problems that the flashing duelists have is that their flashes are clearly worse than the aggressive initiators. For instance, here are some little stats for you on the comparison of flashes between all of these agents. You can see that the cost is all the same for all of the different agents. This is something that Riot did a while back, but then we have the full duration of the flash as well. So you can see that again, the aggressive initiators here have 2-second flashes. So does Reyna, but the other flashing duelists have shorter flashes. So this is when you are fully blind by that flash. This is for how long you will be flashed by it. And then we have the type of flash. So Reyna's flash is obviously only a near sight flash. It doesn't fully flash your screen. You can still see things close up, whereas all the rest are full flashes. I put a range here. Now, obviously, this is kind of debatable, I guess, but I've put for Reyna close or medium range. Phoenix is only really close range, and then for the other three, you can, you know, send them long, you can send them medium range, you can send them short. It's all fine. And then we have, are they destroyable? So Reyna is destroyable. Obviously, that's a main thing with Reyna's flash is that you can just shoot it and it will be destroyed. Skye, I've put here in yellow because you can destroy it, but it's a very fast, small moving target. So it's kind of destroyable, but not as much as Reyna's perhaps. And then the other three can't be destroyed. And then are they rechargeable? No one's are rechargeable other than Skye's. And do they give information? Again, no one's gives information but Skye's. And these last two are very, very good. And that's why Skye sees a healthy pick rate. And so it's pretty clear that Skye probably has the best flashes of everyone, but then in second place is probably pretty clearly KO with the time and his range, and the fact they're not destroyable as well, and the fact that they are a full flash. And so it seems pretty clear that the aggressive initiators have the better flashes, but when you think about the rest of their kit as well, it tends to be stronger than the flashing duelists also. In terms of just KO, his suppression, of course, is extremely strong at the highest levels of the game. Not being able to use your utility for pro players or very high level players is a big deal because they know how to use their utility well, and sometimes they will even rely on that utility to, you know, achieve a certain effect that they might want. And so suppressing them is a pretty big deal, and that's why KO has seen just higher and higher and higher pick rate as more and more teams realize how powerful it is to suppress the opponent. And also the aggressive initiators have the benefit of being able to provide a lot of information. Of course, KO with his knife will tell you how many people are in a certain area, and Skye with her dog and her ult can give you very good information indeed. And at the very top levels of the game, information is very, very important, and oftentimes the team with the better information of where their opponents are will do better in rounds. And so this, I think, is Riot's real duelist problem, is that there is too much design overlap between the two archetypes of aggressive initiators and the flashing duelists. And what that means is, if you were to buff the flashing duelist very much and make them some of the strongest agents in the game, that would then just create the opposite problem, where no one would pick Skye or KO because the flashing duelists are now the best agents in the game. And so you just end up in a problem where it doesn't necessarily matter which one is stronger, because whatever side is stronger means that someone is never going to get picked because of that design overlap. And so what Riot needs to do is they need to try and find a new niche for these flashing duelists. They need to have their own space that is separate from the aggressive initiators. And as I've mentioned here, ideally that would be in keeping with the self-serving style of a duelist, but then also not tread on the movement duelists either. You don't just want to create clones of those so that you just have 6 agents that are all doing the exact same thing. And so hopefully there can be a solution found and the design overlap can be pulled apart somewhat so that we can end up in a situation where you have these flashing duelists being played as a secondary duelist, which they often are right now, or they can even be played as a solo duelist and played alongside the aggressive initiators. That is what they really need to try and achieve, but it's going to be pretty difficult to try and achieve that. But those are just my thoughts. Leave a comment down below on how you would try and solve Riot's duelist problem. And with that, thanks for watching and have a nice day.